Today's lesson is about research methods used in communications. Why do we do research in communications? And what can we learn from research that helps to make us better communicators? Well, there's a whole list of things, but a few include expanding the understanding and knowledge for learning and understanding how we can learn to better communicate with different groups based upon their own preferences for different types of communication, how we can effectively prove lies and tell truths, how we can paint valuable pictures and share valuable information in a way that really connects with individuals, and many, many other things, including increasing your business success through communicating better with those that you work with, and also increasing public awareness. Many different types of research and methods for conducting that research. However, for the purpose of this course, we are going to focus on the most common research methods as they're most likely what you will use as a communication specialist. These include audience analysis, interviews, surveys, content analysis, and focus groups. These methods can either be quantitative or qualitative in nature. Quantitative refers to the numbers. It's when you can computationally, statistically, or mathematically use tools to find results. It's when we can associate a number with something or put it into a valued category. A qualitative research is when we use things that are non-numerical data. As we go through these 5 different research methods, we'll talk about how they can both be used quantitatively and qualitatively. Last class, we talked a lot about audience analysis. Does anyone remember why we do audience analyses? Well, it's primarily to develop messages for target audiences. We are better to prepare messages for specific audiences. We can better understand those we communicate with, and we are able to drive business more effectively by targeting those specific audiences. When we're going about doing an audience analysis, or really any of these types of research methods, we want to use specific sampling techniques that work for us. It is unlikely that you would ever be able to reach every single member of a population. The population is the group that you want to get information from. For instance, if we're developing communications efforts for the beef industry in Idaho, it's unlikely that we would be able to talk to every single beef producer within the state. Therefore, we often sample the population and make inferences or draw conclusions about members of that group based upon what we've received from that sample. The sample is the subset of the population that we actually do the research with. It's who we talk to, or it's who we survey. There are primarily 2 different types of sampling. However, there's lots of different ways to do both random and non-random sampling. When do we know when to use a random or non-random sample? A random sample allows us to generalize to a larger population. A random sample includes techniques such as getting a list of all beef producers in the state of Idaho and using a random sampling technique to choose individuals to sample. This sampling method means that the people who are chosen 100% at random. Okay? 2 techniques that we usually use with random sampling are simple random sampling and stratified random sampling. Simple random sampling is using a random number generator to choose participants. So for instance, there are online tools and techniques where we could assign a number to each one of those individuals, and then we could actually have the number generator select 10 to 12 random numbers or so forth for us to actually sample. A stratified random sample means that we divide them into subpopulations and choose individuals from those subpopulations at random using a number generator. So perhaps we could take that same list, break it into individuals from different regions, and then select so many random numbers from each region. A non-random sample includes choosing individuals based on convenience or purposively. A purposive sample includes choosing participants based on specific criteria, such as those producing a certain quota of profit within the industry. Convenience means that we choose people based on those that we know we can talk to or we have easy access to, or maybe they're provided by a leader within the field as individuals for us to sample. It's important to remember that both random and non-random samples yield a margin of error. A margin of error is the estimate of how much the results given the sample might differ from the answers of the true population or every single individual within there. A random sample typically yields a smaller margin of error because their responses are more generalizable. However, a random sample still has a margin of error that we need to consider. When deciding on the sampling technique, it is important to consider the margin of error you might have. There are lots of online tools that help you to determine what your margin of error is. Survey research is by far the most common method of collecting data from participants. It includes using a questionnaire or a pre-designed survey with a list of questions to collect data. The questionnaire may include a series of several questions, including both close-ended, open-ended questions, and sometimes there's a mixture of both. A close-ended question are those that require an individual to give a specific response that is usually provided. This includes true and false questions, multiple choice, or ranking and rating questions on scales. Open-ended questions allow participants to give responses in a free-form narrative answer. Close-ended questions are often quantitative in nature, and open-ended questions are primarily qualitative in nature. For instance, on a hotel survey, you might be asked to provide information on different things that you preferred or did not on a rating scale in that hotel. That may then yield, which is the quantitative version of a closed-ended question. If you say something is in the lower range of scores or provide it with a 1 to 5, perhaps that survey will then ask you to follow up and provide more information about why your stay was not as enjoyable as you preferred it to be. This usually allows you to select and provide a narrative form that you would type in the answer. That would be an open-ended question and more qualitative in nature. So how do we conduct survey research? Well, it can be conducted by mail, phone, internet, or in person and talking face-to-face with that individual. They should both be quick and efficient whenever you're doing research that is survey-based. Asking individuals to respond to too many questions can result in respondent fatigue, and it will change accurate responses, especially further down on the list. The survey should collect data about the specific population of group of individuals that you choose at that specific time. So it's important to remember that it should be developed for who you're working with. The measure should include questions about preferences or behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs about a specific population in relation to their demographics. It's important to collect demographic data to learn more about the specific individuals and how the different responses in reference to preferences, attitudes, behaviors, or beliefs are based on an individual's age, gender, or etc. For example, preference for internet use may be based on age, correct? Perhaps those that are younger prefer to use internet, email, or texting as opposed to an older demographic that may prefer to still use a general phone call. Several important steps for creating surveys. First, you should establish the goals of the project. What do you want to learn? Next, you should determine your sample. Who will you interview or send the survey to? Next, choose the survey methodology. How will you conduct the survey? Will it be by phone, internet, mail, or face-to-face? Next, you will create the survey. What questions will you ask? Then you'll pre-test the questionnaire to ensure that the questions all make sense and work with the group of individuals you're going to test it with. Testing the questions can see whether or not the responses you get are what you were looking to get with the question. Next, you'll conduct the survey. Ask the questions to the sample. And finally, analyze the data and report your results. There are multiple different types of questions that you can ask on your survey, including yes or no. These are either or questions. Multiple choice. Use this question type when it's realistic and important to provide people with a range of possible answers, such as, how many hours a week do you watch TV? Ranking questions. Use this type of question when you want to learn the respondent's value on one item in relation to another item. From 1 to 10, with indicating your highest preference, which type of TV shows do you prefer to watch each week? Drama, reality, sports, etc. Rating questions. These are questions that are answered on a scale. A Likert type scale is used to answer questions if you strongly agree or strongly disagree with a question. Ratings questions. Semantic differential questions are used to answer questions based on bipolar adjectives, such as from good to bad, positive to negative, from important to not important, from difficult to easy. And finally, we have the open-ended questions that we discussed being the qualitative type. As previously mentioned, these questions allow participants to provide their own answers. Effective surveys all have the following things in common. They're concise and easy to complete. They're set up in an amount of time and an amount of questions that individuals will respond to everyone. They include questions that are clear and understandable by the sample or population you're working with. They're written at the right reading level for those individuals, and they include a mix of open and close-ended questions and different response item types so that someone doesn't just start filling in answers on one side or another, and instead they have to continue reading the questions. And they provide clear instructions and make it very obvious how to respond and mark your answers. Evaluating survey data, we must be able to answer the following questions. How many people were surveyed? How many responded? And how many were in the population to begin with? What's the margin of error? Who administered the survey? Was it an organization, an individual, anyone that might have biases towards the population? How was it conducted? Face-to-face, phone, mail, or via internet? How were the questions worded? Did they drive participants to respond in a specific way? In what order were the questions asked? Those first are usually favored by the respondents. And what was the response average? A poor response rate can badly skew your results from your survey data. The next research method we're going to talk about is a content analysis. A content analysis involves looking at documents and studying information and communication artifacts to learn more about a specific topic. The communication artifacts include texts of various formats, including newspapers, online articles, etc., pictures, audio, and/or video. Conducting a content analysis, you'll analyze all of the sample material line by line or second by second to develop common themes. Then you note the frequency of the themes throughout and different types of related themes that may come about as well. Then you'll develop a coding sheet with explicit definitions, examples, and coding rules for each category to continue to analyze more and more information. I want you to think a little bit about how you might use a content analysis for a newsletter story. For instance, you might go about collecting all of the different newspaper articles that have been available in the last year from a specific area on their FFA program. You could then use that information to see what are the common themes of the things that this area is doing or they focus on within their program, or at least that they're publicizing. That's how we use some of this information, and that's how you would utilize newspaper articles as communication artifacts. A focus group is another method of research. A focus group is a group of people brought together to engage in discussion about a specific topic. This group typically includes 6 to 8 participants, but should not exceed 12, so that there's enough area or room for them to all participate actively and share information back and forth. The thing that's a little bit different about a focus group is that they're not just interacting with the moderator or the person who's doing the interview. They're actually interacting with one another and having candid conversations. They should have an objective moderator who asks the questions. The objective moderator should not drive responses, but instead should just allow the conversation to happen around them. Participants should be selected randomly or proposively from a population. Focus groups are best either recorded with audio or video to ensure that you are able to remember the comments and statements made by all participants. Video works well, especially if we want to see what the body language looks like with those different individuals. However, audio will do the trick if we're really more just focused on what the actual words were that were spoken. As the role of the moderator, it is important to give unbiased responses, unaided recall questions, aided recall questions when needed, attitude and opinion questions to drive conversation, and prompts when required. The moderator should not direct the conversation and should always stay neutral. This includes not responding to questions or answers with a positive or negative response. However, it is important to ask prompt questions when you're looking to gain a little bit more information on what the person has said. Drive the conversation further and explore the topic more. This brings us to the end of our lesson on research methods within communication.